Good morning to you out there. This is Housing Development, your go-to source for trending housing information. The virtual Abuja International Housing Show has come and gone, while the organizers are still putting together resolutions from the 4 days conference to come out with acceptable action plans for leaders in the sector. The memories of the virtual conference will linger on for a long time. The iconic event, which lasted for 4 days, has several dignitaries from around the world in attendance. We'll get to see more presentations from the virtual Abuja International Housing Show. I am your housing diva, Flora Annie.
Visit Housing TV Africa on YouTube and click on the subscribe button. Subscribe to Housing TV Africa to stay updated on latest happenings in Nigeria's housing sector. Follow our social media pages, like and share our posts. On Facebook, Housing Development Program. On Twitter, Housing Program. On Instagram, @Housing Program. Join the conversation and keep up with latest housing updates.
Hello, my name is Casey Rust. I'm the Executive Director of the Centre for Affordable Housing Finance in Africa. We're based in Johannesburg, South Africa. Please keep watching Housing Development Programme. It's a great show.
Welcome back. As economies around Africa grapple with the health and lockdown effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on their populations and businesses, the housing sector offers an opportunity to overcome key risk issues while contributing towards economic recovery and long-term resilience. Housing, both construction and rental, has a very real impact on the economy. This presentation during the virtual Abuja International Housing Show considers the potential housing sector responses that might be offered to the challenges raised by COVID-19. Speaking on the strategies for the delivery of federal government 300,000 housing construction targets, Brigadier General Tunde Rees, retired, and Kehinde Ogundemu, the MD CEO of Nigerian Mortgage Refinance Company PLC, has this to say.
Where there is no regulation, anything goes. No serious investor will invest in an unregulated market. No serious investor will come in when you can't tell developers from cowboys, when you cannot tell scammers from licensed operators. So the first thing I would like to recommend is that if you are going to do 300,000 homes, just do the math. Let's even assume that we are delivering at an average of 5 million naira per unit. That's a lot of money coming into the system with potential for employment. So really, we want to be sure that this money does not end up in the hands of scammers, does not end up in the hands of people who are carrying a briefcase, pretending to be developers, pretending to be housing providers, pretending to be contractors who are nothing, who have nothing to do with all of that. But they have access, and they will be the first to access the delivery of this 300,000. So regulation is key. Not only regulation in terms of delivery, we also need regulation for the entire housing ecosystem, which previous speakers have spoken to. I think Kesia shared a very nice illustration of the housing value chain, and I think my brother Alhaji Magashi also referred to the housing ecosystem. So it's not just dealing with individual parts of the system. We need something that addresses the entire system, wholesale. Otherwise, we are not going to get to where we want to be. This is the first step, regulation, so that serious investors can come into the market. Earlier on, I talked about access to the capital market. One of the most significant things about capital market here and all over the world is regulation, because that's what gives investors confidence. So how are they going to put their money into housing industry that is unregulated? And we have been talking about this for ages. The second thing is We can target providing subsidy at the delivery stage. And then on the side of the consumers, on the demand side, we also need to look at the possibility of enhancing rental ownership. So right now, I'm not aware of anyone who provides lending to these landlords, private sector landlords, who are responsible for most of the housing stock in this country as of today. So we are over-focused in providing mortgages. So can we start to look at other possibilities? Even social landlords, like housing associations in the UK, can we start to look at creating a new class of regulated social landlords who can take on the responsibility because government has given them some subsidies and make these houses available to the targeted households?
We talk about these 300,000 housing units, but how do we empower? How do we increase access to this home ownership? It's easy when people talk about the supply side. Once you have the funds, you get construction started and everything can be done. But we also have to make sure that we create that not potential now, committed people who can buy their houses. We need to have that demand that is real. But how we can increase access to home ownership, number one, is through physical incentives. We know that the biggest challenge to people getting into a home through mortgage is the 20% equity down payment. So are there innovative ways in which we can do this? Maybe the government can give subsidies, can give grants. How can we make that burden lighter for people? Because if we reduce the amount that is required, then people can get into the homes easily. Coupled with that is maybe the Nigeria Mortgage Guarantee Company that we have. NMRC is spearheading or championing with the central bank on how to create that. That will create opportunities for people who cannot come with 20% equity down payment to come with 5%, but they have the other part guaranteed. The guarantee company will also provide default loss protection to mortgage lenders so that they're able to now go in and issue more loans because they know that there's some default protection. It will be doing that without making them unnecessarily assume risk that are not insurable. One other thing is also increased protection that to enable access to the industry, increased protection for the consumers, for the investors, and for taxpayers. We need to have a regime or an environment where we do not allow predatory lending so that people know what they are going into when they're going into a mortgage. And also truth in lending so that they are aware of all the costs. There are no hidden charges, there are nothing, everything is revealed upfront. And they know that, okay, once I get into this, because that allows for planning and better mortgagors in the future. We also need protection for investors. People will not come into a market where you do not know how long it will take for you to foreclose on an asset or for you to get back your return and things like that. And as I said earlier on, we are happy to report that we are getting a lot of traction. A lot of states now, maybe it's COVID-19 induced, are beginning to see the importance of having that legislation passed in their states. As I said, we have so many states that are on the pipeline or at the verge of passing that model mortgage and foreclosure law. One vital thing again is housing, counseling, and education. This is something that is overlooked. People need to be taught that housing, like I said earlier, is not just a place for shelter, but it's also an asset. So before they even get into the home ownership ladder, of getting a mortgage and things like that, they should be properly educated on what is required to get a home, what is required to maintain a home, what is required to improve a home, and things like that. So that by the time they get into it, they're not only surprised, they're well prepared and are going to be faithful and committed to that journey, because it's a journey.
My name is Tunde Reis. I'm happy to endorse the Housing Development Program. I encourage you to continue to watch the Housing Development Program.
I believe in the FCT, we might have been the first actual private developer. At that time, we launched 200 units or so of housing. This is in Karmo. Now, what's the immediate impact of that? Well, you provide Nigerians with houses that are built by private developers, which is a novelty, which was a novelty at the time. What this does is it also competition in terms of bringing down cost with whatever types of housing were available or offered by the government at the time. And so by doing such a development, what happens? You shelter families immediately. You're creating jobs massively. So building a project becomes an employment center in and of itself. You introduce the concept of private contracting, which is also another avenue for employing people and contributing to economic output. Now, this is back in 1991, only about 200 units. If you fast forward to today, we have developed around 6,000 or so units, and we have replicated this model. And all you have to do is just think about the magnifying element of this. So if you have 6,000 houses, you're looking at over 30,000 Nigerians that have been sheltered in these developments. You're looking at over 100 plus contractors and suppliers. And all of this represents economic output. The net result of all this is an increase in the productivity of people, putting money in people's pockets by way of employment, and you're providing roof over people's heads. We've also engaged in backward integration, which has been a very important factor. This further drives down the cost of producing a unit of house. So, for instance, we acquired a couple of brick factories which were prior owned by the government. We invested in them, we turned them around, and these are currently producing, I believe that we're the largest producer of bricks in the country, if I'm not mistaken. And what this does is also to add on to this employment and making as many employment centers as possible. And I think this is what real estate has the capacity to do. So if we ask the question, how do we drive investment in real estate? There's two things I would say. One, developers like ourselves should continue to be forward-thinking and do as much of what we're doing as possible and to do more of it. With each unit of house that we build, that means we're employing more Nigerians, we're creating more private sector contracting, which is also another avenue for employment. And in the end, each project that you do, each house becomes an employment center.
Welcome back. The provision of affordable housing can catalyze development and sustainable economic growth in Nigeria. The MD CEO of Federal Mortgage Bank of Nigeria, Architect Ahmed Dangewa, during the virtual Abuja International Housing Show, focused on the topic, revitalizing the National Housing Fund scheme for impactful affordable housing in Nigeria. He also listed FMBN focus for the years ahead. Have a look.
Well, where we are, honestly, because due to this pandemic, a situation that has left us no option than to ensure the full exploitation of the virtual space and the internet technology to foster this business continuity. The world is now an opportunity to interface with ourselves and exchange ideas and best practices despite this pandemic. What this has taught us is to always continue to think out of the box and leverage more on technology to drive the innovations and development in the housing finance construction. At FMBN, we are trying as much as possible to show that our strategic initiatives to expand our coverage to over 30 million within the next 5 years. We are ensuring that our strategic focus has enabled us to do that. We are also focusing on integrating the informal sector through the cooperative societies, which have and is getting a lot of, it's a new initiative the bank has been undergoing. We're also making a lot of ongoing towards the review of the NHF and FMBN Acts to see that those institutional investors invest properly with their own consent, with their own leverage. We're trying to see that we do that advocacy. Fantastic. We're also doing, we have gone very far, especially engaging the CBN for them to engage the bankers committee so that we make our own concerted efforts toward that. The bank also is in the process of automation, which will soon be implemented to improve our operational turnaround time and introduce new innovative products to match the various housing finance sectors that we are having. So I think we're on the right track, and we're on the verge of ensuring that in Nigeria, mortgage system is in place, because our own effort has been with the advocacy for the state adoption of the model mortgage foreclosure law, which has been ongoing.
My name is Architect Ahmed Dangiwa, Federal Mortgage Bank MD, and I want all Nigerians to be watching this program.
You're watching Housing Development. Now let's take a listen to some other speakers' presentation during the virtual Abuja International Housing Show. Babajide Odusholu, the CEO of Octo5 Holdings Limited, Professor Charles Iyangete, the former MD of NMRC, and Abdul Malik Magdi, the managing partner of Modern Shelter Systems and Services.
I know we see this all the time, but I like numbers speaking to us. We're a population of 200 million Nigerians. Over 50% of that would qualify as what we call adults in this part of the world, 18 and above. Our urbanizational rate, we all know these numbers, it's over 50%. Our GDP for 2019 was 146 billion. It's going to drop this year, according to IMF, by 5.4, but that's a whole lot of money. I mean, put in perspective, we're going to go down by 5.4%. America is going down by 6%. Europe is down. Everywhere is down. COVID has been a leveler and an exposer of all the frailties of the world economy as it's currently structured. But when you come to Nigeria, the number that keeps hitting me in the eye that I cannot swallow is that 70% of Nigeria's GDP is informal. Now, it took me a while to understand what informal meant. Because to me, in the past, I used to think informal meant the artisan on the street or the trader in the market, until I realized that informal also includes you and I. Because informal in the eyes of MBS basically means everybody that is not in the government captured flows. And the truth is that we are the drivers of the economy. Now, put that side by side with the fact that in Nigeria today, all we have is 26,000 mortgages. Kehinde is doing fantastic work at NMRC. Femi is trying to do fantastic work at FHM. Alhaji Dangiwa is doing a huge amount at FMBN. But despite all their collective efforts, you're still battling with 28,000 mortgages. That tells you there's a huge problem with the system. And like you rightly said, I like to think as a disruptor. And as a disruptor, I think different. And the sector that comes to mind for me when it comes to disruption in Nigeria is the fintech sector. If you know what those guys are doing, they've totally upended the game as far as fintech in Nigeria is concerned. But with all the volume of what they've done, it's not as big as real estate. So why do we struggle? I look at it and I look back at us. Yes, we have a lot of shady deals going on in the sector because it is unregulated, like he also mentioned. So what is our problem? Why do we struggle, like Kim said, to attract capital? Why is it that despite all our best efforts, I mean, between the four of us here on this forum, we're responsible for doing over 1,000 homes each in this country. And yet we cannot command capital. If we were to be in America or in Europe or even in Ghana, all of us would be awash capital. So why is it that you go to a meeting, despite all your credentials as a seasoned developer and provider of housing, and you cannot get treated with respect? It boils down to data. It boils down to structure. It boils down to the opacity of the structure as it currently is. Social housing is not achievable in Nigeria until you can achieve standard housing.
If we are to achieve what we are setting out to achieve, and the lessons of COVID pandemic is one that we must never forget. Urbanization, as has been pointed out in the case that I believe it was Mr. Shapiro that presented, is something that is so critical for mapping out Nigeria's policy in terms of housing. And so if we're to have livable cities, we need to address this innovatively. We need to build sustainably. and we need to address climate issues. We're signatories to the Paris Agreement. We need long-term funding, and I'm happy to hear Mr. Magashi presented in the way he did, and I'll just get back to some of those. And our building technologies need to adapt to the times. We need to build social infrastructure to support these livable cities. So we need good health centers within good proximity. We need good schools to make them livable. And I've said this many times before, and I'm glad to see the Center for Affordable Housing Finance now has reached the point of building this robust economic model for housing for Nigeria. That's something we started at least 3 years ago. And we need a national housing policy. I've advocated this numerous times. We absolutely need to have a national housing policy. Our capital market is a mere 12.6 trillion. This compared to the second largest economy in Africa, the GDP of 368 billion, the capital market is twice that GDP at 727 billion. That's about 30 billion. This is the opportunity for financing affordable housing going forward. Our bond market is 15.27 trillion. Our ETF capitalization is about 14 trillion. And in our pensions, we have a total about 10 trillion as of April. These present opportunities for driving the funding of housing in the nation. We understand the federal government is looking to raise the pension to the degree of 200 trillion. However, PwC recently showed that we have something in the region of 300 billion in debt capital that we can unlock for housing. We also have an expansion room in the banking sector of about 6.7 trillion. Much of that could be used to fund housing if the instruments are structured right.
Everything is about the institutions, about the mortgage availability, funding availability, developers, and financial institutions. But nobody actually starts conversations with the off-takers. What do they need? Who are these off-takers? How do we identify them? If we don't know them, how do we know what to build for them? And we're not even talking of off-takers that are non-formal sector people or people earning 30,000, drivers and all that. We're talking of civil servants, policemen and women, people in the paramilitary, guys that are doing their best to keep us safe, and the bulk of the contributors to the National Housing Fund program. Civil servants, even at the 9% that CBN is proposing for a blended mortgage rate that already Family Home Funds is trying to achieve. I know they've been doing a lot on that. Femi and I have spoken extensively on that, and there are a lot of schemes on that, NMRC as well. But even at the 6% of the National Housing Fund FNBN scheme, what is available? Policemen, for example, the other ranks cannot even afford a house of 4 or 5 million naira. The money, they simply can't afford the mortgage repayments, the houses in the market. Even when you build 4 million, 5 million for them, which is quite another conversation entirely, because people are complaining they cannot even build 3.5, 4 million, 5 million naira houses. But even where you succeed to build those houses, these guys, you find out that once you put their income on the repayment schedule, even at 20 years, tenor, long tenor, zero equity contribution, they still can't afford, to service these facilities. There's also an issue of the supply deficit. A lot of there are mortgages in theory, like I said, the Family Home Funds, the NMRC, the FMBN, they've done a lot in the last 7 years, to remove equity contribution, reduce barriers to entry. But technically, the houses are not available, even though in theory we have mortgages, for these income groups. So the issue is we don't have enough houses at the 5 million naira below. The funding challenges, everybody has spoken about the source of funds are very high interest rates, and ultimately these funds are passed on to the off-takers and the price of the house. We have to also be sincere and say that there's a lot of capacity issues on the part of real estate developers. We have very, very few developers today in the market, that can give you 100 houses, even if you give them the funding. There are some issues around organization, about project management, about skilled labor. I mean, a lot of things, go into the issue of capacity. But the truth is that we don't have many developers today that can give you 100 houses a year, even if, you give them all the necessary funds. So we need to step up, when it comes to that. It's not enough to just complain that government is not giving us money or there are not cheap funds available. We also need to build our capacity of our people.
Your water and housing development. That is the much I can bring on from the virtual Abuja International Housing Show, First Africa's virtual exhibition and conference. Thanks for watching. I shall bring more updates on our subsequent edition. Remember, you can still log in and visit exhibitors on the platform of Virtual Abuja International Housing Show. Until then, do stay safe. I remain Flora Ani, your housing diva.